Yo, what is up guys, your boy IzuKage here with a new what if, and this what if is what if Deku ate the Suna Suna no Mi. You see, I would have dropped this video yesterday, but
she will be mine.
let's just say something came up. But you all voted for this one on the poll, so enough waiting, let's get right into the what if. So we start this story off with a 5-year-old Izuku on his way to the quirk doctor. Izuku hasn't shown any signs of a quirk and Inko is starting to get worried, so she decided to take him to the same doctor that Hisashi always went to get, his quirk checked out. So Izuku is chilling in the backseat, playing with his All Might and Endeavor action figures, and in about 10 minutes they arrive. And Inko already had an appointment, so they're just waiting outside. While waiting, Izuku's attention was drawn to an RC car silently moving under the waiting chairs in front of them. He looks at Inko and she doesn't see them, so he decides to keep an eye on it. Izuku is watching the RC car as it zips around the hallway until it stops abruptly. Then a voice from inside the doctor's office said, "Did you make that RC car?" And the girl said, "Of course I did, it's one of my babies." And the doctor said, "Her baby, okay." And then from the same office, the door opened up and a girl about Izuku's age with shoulder-length pink hair came out. She ran to pick up her RC car and noticed Izuku looking at her strangely. And Izuku is wondering why this girl has some weird eyes. They look like crosshairs in a scope. And the girl ran up to Izuku's chair and said, "Do you like my car? I made it myself." And now the girl is right in front of his face and Izuku was stuck with the wall behind him and he said, "Yeah, it's cool." But before she could harass him even more, the girl's mom called her from down the hall. The girl frowned and said, "Well, bye, I have to go. My name is Mei Hatsume," and she ran off. Inko watched all of this and laughed and said, "Izuku, seems like you found yourself a friend." Izuku was thinking the complete opposite, but they were called into the doctor's office. Inko and Izuku sit down and the doctor said, "Well, based on your files here, you want to check if your son will manifest a quirk?" And Inko nodded and the doctor said, "Well, no problem." And he brings Izuku to an x-ray room. There they take a few photos and after they finish developing, the doctor comes back with the bad news. He said, "Well, Miss Midoriya, it seems like your son Izuku here is quirkless." He opens the envelope with the x-rays and shows them to her and says people with quirks have only one joint in their toe, and he points out on the x-ray photo that Izuku has 2 joints in his pinky toe, meaning he will not manifest a quirk. This news was devastating for Inko, so much so that she broke out into tears, and the doctor just let her have some silence. Well, Izuku was just confused why she was crying. But after a minute or so, Inko got herself together and pleaded with the doctor if there was anything he could do. And the doctor looked at Inko and said, "How desperate are you?" Inko said, "Very." But before we go on, let me have a little explanation. Inko is really desperate because Hisashi was like the breadwinner of the house, meaning he was making all the money. So when he left, Inko had only her savings to live off of, and with a kid to take care of, it's starting to run low. So if Izuku doesn't become a hero and make good money, they're off to the streets. So the doctor tells Inko he may know of a way for Izuku to get a quirk, but it does have side effects. Inko wasn't too concerned, but she asked what they were, and the doctor said, well, 1, he can't take showers like he normally would. Basically, anything with water is off limits, like pools, beaches, or the rain. To Inko, this wasn't all that important, so she agreed. The doctor brought Izuku to a different area than he did before. It was a room with a collection of treasures, and the doctor began to monologue. "When I was a kid, I used to travel the world and bring back anything I found along the way. And while visiting the pyramids of Giza, I found this." And from a wooden box, he pulled out a weirdly colored fruit. He continued to explain, "This fruit was eaten by the king of Egypt, Crocodile. He was said to have immense power before the time of quirks. So the doctor handed Izuku the fruit and said, "Eat up." Izuku was hesitant, but the doctor assured him it was okay. Either nothing happens and it was a regular old fruit, or he becomes comparable to a king. Izuku thought for a second and looked at the fruit. He then took a huge bite into it and had a look of disgust in his face, but forced it down. The doctor was waiting for something to happen, anything, but nothing did. He said, "How do you feel?" Izuku said, I feel normal." And the doctor sighed and said, I guess it was just an old wives' tale. So he grabbed Izuku's right hand to bring him out to Inko, but once he touched it, he froze in place and the moisture in his body began to suck right out of it, leaving a lifeless husk of the doctor. Izuku was wondering why he stopped moving, and he went to tap him on the leg, and this caused the husk to fall over and dispersing into sand. Izuku was shocked. He looked at his hands and thought, did I do this? And he slowly began to back up out of the room. Inko saw him and said, "Well, Izuku, how do you feel?" And Izuku was still shocked from what just happened, but he has to play it cool. He said, "Good." The doctor said everything went well and decided to take a nap. Inko said, "That's weird. Well, let's go." Inko went to grab Izuku's left hand and he shouted, "Wait!" But it was too late. Izuku started crying. He just killed his mom. But then he heard, "Are you okay, Izuku?" And he opened his eyes and Inko was kneeling down in front of him. He ran and hugged Inko and she said, "Whoa there, I know you have a quirk and it's exciting, but let's just get home." So she lifted Izuku up and started walking back. While on his way to the car, Izuku looked at his right hand and thought, this must have something to do with that power. So he decided to shove his hand into his pocket, just, so nothing would happen. So while on the drive back home, Izuku decided to test his theory. He grabbed his Endeavor action figure in his right hand and his All Might in his left hand, but nothing happened to either of them, so now he was even more confused. Why won't it dry up? But as he said that, the Endeavor action figure started to shrink and dry up. Izuku was in shock, but he has to learn how to use this so he doesn't hurt anyone. Well, anyone else, thinking back to the doctor. So once they get home, Izuku ran to his room and Inko just thought, he was excited to have a quirk. So the entire day, Izuku tried to control this power. He ripped pages out of his books and started practicing with them, seeing what triggers the ability to go off. And after he had ripped all the pages out of 5 of his books, he thinks he might have gotten it. If he expresses any sort of strong emotion, his right hand has the ability to suck the moisture out of, well, for what he knows, anything. So we fast forward to late into the night and Izuku is asleep and Inko is up watching TV. She's bored flipping through channels when she decides to see what happened during the day from the news. Like usual, they talk about villain attacks, hero going up the ranks, but one thing that caught her eyes was a killing. It was a doctor found dead in his office. Detectives have nothing to go off of. The building didn't have any cameras in and around the property, they were going through a system upgrade, but it was just bad timing. And the body itself wasn't even fully intact, it was partially in sand. Inko just stared at the screen and thought, could it be? No, it can't be. Izuku doesn't even have any sand abilities. Or does he? Inko's mind began to think of all sorts of crazy theories, but she just shut off the TV, had a cup of tea to calm her mind, and went to bed. The next day was a school day, so Izuku got up a bit earlier than usual to keep practice on the pages, from his books. Then he got his stuff ready and it was off to school. The school day wasn't anything special until recess. Izuku was playing in the sandbox when Bakugou and his goons showed up. Bakugou said, "Ready for a beatdown, Deku?" And he punched his palm and a mini explosion went off. A sweat rolled down Izuku's forehead, but he realized that now he has a quirk. Izuku got up and said, "Don't mess with me, Bakugou, I finally have a quirk." and I'm not afraid to use it. Izuku was trying to say that to scare him off because there's no way he can kill Bakugou. Bakugou saw through this bluff though and said, "Okay Izuku, that's the 100th time, it isn't working." And he ran at Izuku and punched him in the chest. Izuku was afraid and was too slow to react, but when Bakugou punched him, it went right through his chest. Everyone watching freaked out because he just punched right through him, and everyone was screaming in panic and ran off into classes. Even Bakugou was scared, what did he just do? And he pulled his fist out and the hole began to close up again. Now Bakugou was even more confused. Does he actually have a quirk? But he ran off too. Soon Bakugou and Izuku were called to the principal's office. She stared at Bakugou with anger and said, "Young man, I am tired of seeing you in my office, and now I heard you injured Izuku again?" But Izuku interrupted and said, "No miss, I'm fine," and he pulled down his collar to show his chest, there was no wound. And Bakugou played along and said, "Yeah, I didn't even touch him. I'm not sure where you got that from." The school principal squinted her eyes at the two and said, "Well, Bakugou Katsuki, I don't want to see you in my office again. And Izuku, I heard you finally unlocked your quirk. Congratulations." Izuku nodded and they both ran out of the office. So while walking back to class, Bakugou, with a look of struggle on his face, said, "Thank you." Izuku said, "What did you say?" Bakugou said it again. "Thank you for not ratting me out," and added, "Your quirk is kinda cool, but not as good as mine," and he ran off. Izuku was confused why he was so weird about it, but shrugged it off. So as the days went by, Izuku started to get a hand of what his quirk really had in store. But he remembered how the doctor said it was once the power of the first king of Egypt, Crocodile. But Izuku did what all of us do when we don't know something, Google it. Izuku did his own research on King Kroc, he came up with that nickname himself. There's really not that much to know about him other than stories told in the region of how he was the embodiment of sand. He had control of it at will and he was unable to be ambushed because he could just turn into sand. So if these stories were to be believed, he could be this powerful. So Izuku started to train his hardest to be able to have this much control of his abilities. First, his transformation into sand. It seemed like potentially his most powerful ability, so he should hone it and hone it well. So fast forward 5 years. Izuku is 11 years old and he has absolutely done what he set out to do. Izuku has control of his sand transformation that even Crocodile didn't have. He did all kinds of training to increase his reaction time and learned about the properties of sand to know his weaknesses and strengths. So let me show you. It's a school day and word has been going around about how Izuku is way stronger than Bakugou. And this is a no-no for Bakugou, only he can be the strongest. So while on break, he confronts Izuku and he says, "So since you got some lame quirk, you think you're better than me?" Izuku raised an eyebrow and said, "I never said that." Bakugou said, "Well, everyone thinks it and I'm gonna show you who's boss." Bakugou without warning rushed Izuku and set off an explosion in his face. Izuku though reacted quickly, raising his hand in and turning it into a sand shield, blocking the attack. When the smoke cleared, Izuku was gone. Bakugou and everyone watching was confused, but from a pile of sand under Bakugou, he received an uppercut from Izuku reforming. This caused Bakugou to fly up into the air and landing in some dirt. Bakugou wheezed because all of the air rushed out of his lungs from the impact. He was breathing heavily and slowly got up. He looked at Izuku and gritted his teeth, but before the fight could continue, a teacher with a quirk similar to Sero came in between the two. But Bakugou didn't care and rushed Izuku, but the teacher shot out tape out of his palms and restrained Bakugou. And by now, Izuku had amassed a sizable fan club and the girls watching were cheering him on. Izuku smiled, which melted all their hearts. So again to the principal's office. Bakugou was strapped to the chair this time and Izuku was just vibing. The principal started to speak. "Again, you two. I thought we talked about this." Izuku said, "Well, Bakugou started it, and I was only defending myself." The principal said, "Yes, I know, Izuku, I saw all the footage, but you had other options than to fight that you didn't exercise. And as an honor roll student, I really expected better from you, Izuku." Izuku looked down to the ground in shame, and to Bakugou. The principal said, "What haven't I already said to you, Bakugou? This ego of yours isn't healthy. I'm glad Izuku put you in your place because frankly, you need it. Now, 3-day suspensions for both of you." Izuku wanted to protest this, but he should just be happy. Some students got expelled for a simple dress code violation, so Izuku went home. And of course, Inko wasn't happy, but after explaining the situation, she understood. Still, she was pretty sad at the fact that these two would fight when they were such good friends growing up, but she only had hopes it would get better. Anyways, fast forward 2 years and it's the final day of school. The teacher comes in with some job aptitude tests and said, "I was gonna pass these out, but I know you all want to be heroes," and throws the paper up into the air. And everyone starts using their quirks, having fun. Everyone except Bakugou and Izuku. So the teacher says, "I see here we have 2 students who want to go to UA." And hearing that, both Izuku and Bakugou glance at each other and scoff. And the students in class started to say, "Well, yeah, those 2 are the strongest, so it only makes sense." And soon the bell rings, signifying the end of their final day at middle school. So the teacher said, "Next time I'll be seeing you all, hopefully, as pro heroes." Izuku got outside and turned his lower half into sand and spun it around, propelling himself up, basically flying. Everyone watching just thought, how much more powerful could he be? And his fangirls are like, "Oh my god, Izuku, he only gets better." But yeah, something Izuku couldn't predict was rain. It started to fall and Izuku tried absorbing the moisture, but with millions of droplets falling down, he became susceptible to his most powerful weakness, water. Izuku started falling out of the sky and landed in an alleyway unable to move because water binds sands together, and since his whole body is basically sand, he can't move. But this was possibly the worst situation Izuku could be in. From the sewers, a sludge monster trying to escape a pro hero appears. It sees Izuku and says, "Oh look, the perfect body." Izuku, using the limited mobility he has, manages to grab the sludge villain before it could touch him and absorbs its moisture. The sludge monster backed up quickly enough but it shrank in size considerably. It was now a third of its original size but was still alive. This was bad for Izuku because now the sludge villain was mad and he was unable to move. So the sludge villain began running, or in his case, sliding over to Izuku, but from a distance you could hear the phrase, "I am here." All Might landed between Izuku and the sludge monster and threw a Detroit smash, sending the sludge monster back into a wall. This punch managed to change the weather and stopping the rain altogether, even pushing away clouds. And the sun began to evaporate the water on Izuku, allowing him some more mobility. So he slowly got up and saw All Might bottling the sludge villain. All Might said, "Fear not, citizen, for I have saved you." Izuku said, "Whatever," and just walked away. All Might tilted his head and thought, strange, but he needs to return the villain to the police station. And without Izuku grabbing him, All Might had more time in his buff form and got to the police station to hand in the villain. Back with Izuku, he got home and immediately started to think of any way to stop what just happened from happening again. If it was a different villain attacking him, that could have easily been his death if it weren't for All Might. So Izuku got to the drawing board. What do you guys think Izuku could do to combat the rain, or just any type of liquid from temporarily paralyzing him? Well, tell me in the comments because that is where I'm going to be leaving this one off. Thank you guys for sticking around to the end of the video. If you liked it, like, and if you like my content in general, subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next What If.